In a secret recording intended for Dr. Fletcher, a marine biologist called Dr. Olive introduces herself as an expert on ocean trenches, revealing that she has worked with the US Navy. The woman says she heard about the scientist's new prototype, which is trying to make a diving suit that can go to depths never reached before, and offers to be his diver. Days later, Olive begins her mission, and after sinking more than 1,500 meters below sea level, the visibility of her surroundings becomes increasingly limited. The diver then asks them to turn on the lights of the underwater drone, but as she does so, she notices that she doesn't seem to be alone in that place, and she starts to get scared. At the same time, Olive ends up losing communication, and before she can be rescued, she is surprised by a gigantic sea creature, which attacks her with its tentacles. Thanks to this, the underwater drone is destroyed and decoupled from the woman, causing the diving suit to stop working. Sensing Olive's desperation, the members of the safety boat pull the diver back to the surface. After rescuing her companion, Dara claims that the suit has collapsed, and the news leaves the woman confused, as there was no way this could have happened. Inside the ship, Olive returns to her room, where she is surprised by Dr. Fletcher, and becomes angry when she notices that the scientist has taken one of her family photographs. Disgusted by the poor outcome of the mission, the man asks what happened at the bottom of the ocean, and the woman replies that she has no idea. Upon hearing this, Fletcher becomes even more furious, and after pushing his employee against the wall, he claims that Olive is fired. Despite being devastated, the woman decides to check the condition of her diving suit so that she can find out what happened during her exploration of the depths. During her investigation, the researcher realizes that one of the suit's compartments is damaged, and when she checks inside, she comes across a large gooey object. Curious, Olive takes a closer look at the item and believes it may be the egg of some creature from the depths of the ocean. Just then, the woman hears footsteps coming towards her and hurries to hide the egg in her toolbox. Soon after, Dara appears, and after revealing that he knows about his friend's dismissal, he tells her that it doesn't seem fair, since nothing that happened was her fault. The next day, the boat docks at one of the UK's docks, and after gathering her belongings, along with the case containing the sinister egg, the woman heads home. Shortly afterwards, Dr. Olive is reunited with her boyfriend Matt, who is extremely happy to see her back. After seeing the young man again, the biologist walks to her basement, where she begins to organize her newest office. With everything in order, the woman decides to investigate the mysterious egg she found in her suit. And when she turns on her lamp, she notices that the hatchling seems to react aggressively to the light. The doctor then turns off the lights at the same moment, and before she can continue with her research, she is surprised by Matt, who is amazed by his girlfriend's new office. After a few minutes of chatting, Olive lies down to sleep, not even realizing that the unknown hatchling is getting closer and closer to escaping from her toolbox. In the morning, the woman goes down to her office to continue her research, but at that moment, she comes across the eggshell she had found on her mission. Concerned, Olive uses her flashlight to look for the hatchling, and as she does so, she can see some tentacles sneaking under one of the tables. Carefully, the biologist approaches the creature, but before she can react, she is hit by a dark ink, which turns her eyes completely black. Minutes later, Olive wakes up on the floor of her office, and after making sure that the hatchling is still under the desk, she decides to turn off the lights so that she can calm him down. The woman then uses a cardboard box to catch the animal, allowing her to place it in her aquarium. Just then, the biologist hears her boyfriend coming home and runs to hide the remains of the hatched egg on her desk. Before leaving the place, Olive uses a tarpaulin to hide the creature in the aquarium, and when she reunites with her partner, Matt tells her that he has booked dinner at one of the best restaurants in town. Realizing that her eyes still have traces of the hatchling's ink in them, the woman says she'll touch up her makeup, and minutes later, the couple set off towards the restaurant. During the journey, Olive realizes that her eyes are extremely sensitive to the lights of the vehicle's headlights, and she worries about the side effects that the creature's substance may have had on her body. At the restaurant, Matt is worried by his girlfriend's behavior, who starts eating every meal on the table desperately, as if she hasn't eaten for days. When Olive gets home, she gets sicker and sicker and realizes that her body is expelling the same dark ink that was shot from the hatchling's body. The next day, the biologist continues her research into the sea creature and decides to ask her friend Dara for help so that they can find out what kind of animal it really is. During his analysis, the man claims that the hatchling could belong to an almost prehistoric species, as it has very ancient features and doesn't even resemble a modern animal. It also reveals that the creature could be sick, as its body shouldn't be as faded as it is. While he is explaining, Olive starts to get a strange headache, and noticing that Dara is tapping on the aquarium glass with her fingers, she shouts for the researcher to stop immediately. Trying to get his friend to seek help to treat the symptoms she is suffering, the man asks her to see a doctor. But the woman refuses, as she doesn't feel ill. Olive then tells him that she wants to find out if this is a new species, and if it has never been encountered by humans, and Dara replies that she could only do this in her professional laboratory. However, the biologist says that Dr. Fletcher cannot know what is going on, and orders her friend to keep the hatchling's existence a secret. Despite his reluctance, Dara assures her that he won't say anything, and after giving her some instructions on how to feed the creature, he asks her to come to his laboratory for the weekend. In the morning, Olive tries to leave the house to go for her morning run, but gives up when she realizes that the sunlight is affecting her vision. So she decides to lie in her bathtub for a while, but during her rest, she ends up having a nightmare in which she relives the moment she was attacked by the monster at the bottom of the sea. Hours later, the biologist gathers different foods to try to figure out what the hatchling should eat, and becomes increasingly frustrated at not getting any results. Realizing that she only has one last option, Olive removes one of her fingers with the knife, causing the creature to react aggressively as soon as she brings her hand close to the glass. The woman then opens the top of the aquarium, allowing the drops of blood from her wound to feed the baby. Later, Olive wakes up in the early hours of the morning to hear strange noises coming from her basement. In order to calm the animal, the woman decides to go downstairs and sings a lullaby while the creature is fed on her blood. The next day, the couple receive a visit from Ellie, but when she notices that her sister has been injured by accident, the biologist begins to have various illusions, in which she sees the woman's arm being covered in black ink. Just then, Olive hears her phone ringing, and when she answers, she hears the voice of Dr. Fletcher, who is furious after discovering that his former employee has stolen a hatchling found at the mission. So that he can get back what belongs to him, the man orders the woman to take the creature to his laboratory in about an hour. Otherwise, he will travel to her house with a team of police and lawyers. Devastated, Olive tells Matt and Ellie that she has to go out to solve a problem at work, and when they hear this, her family tells her that they have several plans for that evening. Pressed by the comments, the woman rebukes them and says that she has to do everything to keep her job, since her sister's visit is causing her to spend more and more money. Upon hearing this, Ellie feels humiliated and leaves, accompanied by Matt, who runs after her to try and calm her down. Seizing her chance, Olive returns to her hatchling, and noticing that the little one seems to be hungry once again, she goes to a supermarket so that she can buy more food. Shortly afterwards, when she returns to the basement, she uses large quantities of meat to feed the animal, but at that moment, she is surprised by Fletcher, who has broken into her house. Realizing that his ex-employee was keeping the hatchling in that place, the man pushes her away and opens the aquarium so that he can capture the creature. Furious at her boss's actions, Olive throws one of her laboratory devices at the man's head, who falls to the ground, stunned by the impact. As she approaches, the scientist grabs her leg and says that she has no idea what she is keeping in her house. However, Olive says that she is fully aware of the animal she is raising, and from now on, she has new food for it. Frightened, the man tries to crawl away from the woman, who positions her creature on the ground, allowing it to pounce on the scientist and wrap itself around his neck. While Fletcher is being finished off by the monster, Olive ends up panicking at the scene she's watching and runs to the bathroom. Minutes later, the woman returns to her hatchling, who is still feeding on what's left of Fletcher. Wanting to remove the body from her basement, Olive decides to throw what's left of the scientist into the sea, at which point she ends up finding a mysterious key among his body. The biologist quickly makes her way to her late boss's ship and uses the key to open his private safe, allowing her access to the mission documents. Olive also finds several ancient archives depicting superstitious rituals that were performed thousands of years ago. Without wasting any time, the biologist takes all the records she found in the safe, and before she leaves, she starts a fire inside the ship. A few days later, while Olive is taking a shower, Ellie talks to Matt in the kitchen and says she's still angry about the insults her sister said. Trying to understand why the woman has been behaving so strangely, the sister decides to go to her basement so that she can find out what Olive is doing there. When she arrives at the office, Ellie begins to investigate the desk, without even imagining that she is being watched by the creature. Before she could find the baby, the woman was surprised by the biologist, who told her she shouldn't be there. Furious, Ellie begins to question the researcher, who becomes increasingly desperate when she notices that the creature is about to grab her sister's leg. Trying to prevent the worst from happening, Olive begins to humiliate the woman, who is extremely devastated and leaves. During dinner, Matt tries to talk to his girlfriend and begins to tell her about the situation of Mrs. Jones, one of his current patients, who is terminally ill. The man also reveals that the elderly woman can no longer speak, making it impossible for her to communicate with any of the hospital staff. Upon hearing this, Olive ends up having a crazy idea, and after going to the hospital the next morning, she uses Matt's card to gain access to Mrs. Jones' room. As soon as she finds her, the biologist puts the old woman in her trunk, and before she can leave, she is surprised by her boyfriend. Without understanding anything, Matt asks why the woman is there at the hospital, and Olive reveals that she came to bring the access card, which he had left at home. Before she had to answer any more questions, the biologist left, and when she got home, she positioned the old woman in the middle of her basement. Soon afterwards, Olive switches off the lights, allowing the creature to approach and entwine its tentacles in the body of its victim, who ends up being devoured. Hours later, the woman is cleaning out her basement, and after observing her hand for a few seconds, she decides to taste the blood on her fingers. Thanks to this, Olive ends up entering a state of illusion, allowing her to see the colossal creature from the bottom of the sea once again. The next day, Dara is walking quietly through the city when he comes across his friend watching him from inside her car. Trying to reconcile with Olive, the man explains why he told Fletcher what he knew, as he has received numerous threats of dismissal. Despite this, the biologist decides to take her friend down to the basement, and Dara is amazed to see how big the creature has become. At that moment, Olive says that Fletcher has made a serious mistake by trying to steal her son, and then she turns off the lights, allowing the hatchling to devour the man in a few seconds. That evening, the biologist sits at the dinner table next to her sister and tries to contain herself as she stares at the woman's neck, as her craving for meat continues to grow. Noticing that Matt seems stressed, Ellie goes to her brother-in-law and asks what's going on. The man explains that one of his most debilitated patients has disappeared, and the hospital managers are trying to blame him for what happened, so his career could be in jeopardy. In the morning, Ellie tries to prepare a farewell letter for her sister, but suddenly she realizes that Matt has come home early from work, so she goes to him to ask what happened. Devastated, the nurse replies that he has been fired, and the woman decides to stay with him in the room so that they can talk about what happened. In the basement, Olive notices strange behavior in her creature, and when she gets closer to understand what's going on, she discovers that the monster has just laid eggs. Excited by what she has discovered, the woman rushes to tell her family the news, but as she goes upstairs, she comes across her boyfriend with her sister. Furious, Olive uses one of her decorations to hit Matt on the head, who falls unconscious, leaving Ellie desperate. Before she can attack the woman, Ellie is hit in the leg, making her unable to move and allowing the biologist to drag her down to the basement. Olive then traps her sister in the wall and sits outside, waiting for the monster to come out and devour her. Panicked, Ellie tries to pull out the toolbox to use something to free herself, but to no avail, and she ends up with a cut on one of her feet. Quickly, the woman picks up a piece of fabric next to her, and after stopping the bleeding, she grabs the saw, allowing it to start cutting the cable that is holding her. Knowing what is about to happen, Olive covers her face for a few seconds, and as soon as Ellie is spotted by the creature, the biologist has her eyes completely taken over by the dark ink. Minutes later, Matt wakes up on the bedroom floor, and after noticing that his head is injured, he runs to find Olive. As he descends the stairs, the man comes across his girlfriend and realizes that she looks extremely different from usual. Matt asks about Ellie's whereabouts, and Olive replies that she has imprisoned her sister in the basement. Without hesitating, the nurse opens the door to rescue the woman, but in doing so, he ends up being pushed by his girlfriend, causing him to fall down the stairs and be seriously injured. Desperate, Ellie tries to reach out to save Matt's life, but the monster is faster and pulls the man into its mouth, devouring him while the woman watches. Now that she has even used her own family to feed her baby from the depths, Olive walks into the living room, where she starts laughing and crying at the same time. After managing to grab a hammer from the toolbox, Ellie tries to use the object to free herself, but desperation only hinders her and she ends up injuring herself once again. In her living room, Olive creates various drawings of everything she has visualized in her illusions, but suddenly she hears noises coming from her basement and decides to check out what's going on. On arriving at the scene, the woman comes across her sister trying to escape, and orders her to remain silent, as the monster needs to rest after its meal. Ellie then claims that Olive is nothing more than a crazed criminal, but the biologist reveals that the creature is none other than a goddess, who has chosen her as her companion. Outraged, the woman attacks one of the tentacles with her hammer, but she is quickly disarmed by her sister, who explains that all she did was make the necessary sacrifices for the monster's survival. Trying to convince Ellie, the biologist hugs the creature's tentacles and shows her one of its eggs, explaining that this is just the beginning of a new era, where these gods will be able to rule over humanity. Frightened, the woman asks her sister to stay away from the monster, but Olive says that everything is fine and that her hatchling would never try to hurt her. However, before she could let go of the creature, the biologist began to be crushed by it, which in a few seconds split her body in half. To avoid the same fate as her sister, Ellie takes the woman's key from one of her pockets, but the lights in the room are destroyed by the hatchling. Quickly, the woman uses a lighter as a light source to protect herself from the bug, which begins to encircle her with its giant tentacles. At that moment, Ellie comes across the couple's neighbor, who has gone to the house after hearing the cries of despair, and so that he can see, he decides to turn on his flashlight. Thanks to this, the old man manages to save her from the creature's attack, and before she is devoured, she cries out for help. A few minutes later, the authorities were called and several vehicles turned up. After collecting all the evidence and traces left by Dr. Olive, the detectives report that they were unable to find the creature described by Ellie, and suggest that the woman undergo post-traumatic treatment. However, one of the police officers claims to have found a break in the plumbing at the site, and theorizes that the animal may have escaped through that opening, so they will do some searching in the area. Upon hearing this, Ellie reflects on everything she has witnessed, while the monster flees through the city's sewage channels, crawling between the tunnels until it can find new victims. Sometime later, in one of the psychiatric hospitals in the area, one of the nurses prepares a breakfast tray for her patients and goes to one of the rooms. The woman then starts distributing the food to each of her patients, one of whom is Ellie, who is watching an emergency report the news. Due to a phenomenon not yet understood by sanitation officials, several areas of the city are suffering from high levels of flooding, causing countless families to abandon their homes. Soon after, the reporters reveal that part of the population has been falling ill due to the poor water treatment, and that all marine life around the UK has been increasingly diminished. Hearing all those reports and noticing the appearance of the animals that were attacked during the sanitation crisis, Ellie begins to despair, because she knows exactly what caused it all at that moment. The nurse has her attention focused on one of her patients, and seizing her chance, the woman decides to flee the psychiatric hospital, using a stolen vehicle to travel to the beach. Panicked, Ellie watches the sea as she tries to look for traces of the demonic creature, and suddenly, she realizes that one of the children has found one of the eggs. Soon afterwards, the woman hears noises coming from the ground, and when she looks down, she realizes that the ground on the beach is littered with eggs, which are being carried by the tide. As she watches the dozens of hatchlings emerging, Ellie looks towards the horizon and is terrified to see a colossal creature emerging from the depths of the ocean. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.